A glamorous black woman in a shimmering evening gown steps into a room filled with Nazi officers. They recognize her instantly. Josephine Baker, Europe's most celebrated entertainer. They welcome her warmly, convinced she's simply a performer seeking their approval. They speak freely about military operations, believing she's too preoccupied with fame to comprehend strategy. They never suspect that every word they utter is being catalogued in her mind, later to be transcribed in invisible ink and delivered to the French resistance. What the Nazis saw as harmless celebrity was actually their greatest vulnerability. This is the untold story of how Josephine Baker transformed enemy prejudice into the perfect espionage weapon. Subscribe to discover how one woman's brilliance turned Nazi assumptions into Allied intelligence that changed the course of World War II. Paris, December 1940. Nazi forces have controlled France for half a year. At a private Chateau gathering, German officers mingle with champagne glasses, discussing war matters with casual confidence. Among them moves Josephine Baker, diamonds catching the light at her neck, her famous smile captivating everyone present. The officers are thrilled to host the legendary performer from the Folies Bergerie, the woman who'd mesmerized Paris throughout the 1920s. Between toasts, they converse with her freely. Troop deployments, supply chain difficulties, strategic defensive locations. They assume she's a political, merely an entertainer grateful for any audience, regardless of their politics. They presume a black American woman lacks the education, the awareness, the capacity to care about warfare or espionage. They believe she poses no threat whatsoever. Every single assumption is catastrophically wrong. Josephine Baker operates as a WWII Bureau agent, French military intelligence. Every conversation occurring tonight is being committed to memory with precision. Every detail the Germans carelessly reveal will be encoded in invisible ink onto her sheet music, then smuggled to free French forces. Every prejudiced assumption the Nazis harbor becomes a weapon she wields against them with devastating effectiveness. She smiles brilliantly, responds to their jokes, graciously accepts their flattery, and forgets nothing. This is Josephine Baker's secret war, where the Nazis perceived an entertainer, the French resistance deployed an intelligence operative capable of accessing circles no white agent could penetrate. And Baker herself recognized an opportunity to combat fascism through the one advantage the Nazis never anticipated, a black woman whose intelligence far exceeded their racist expectations. To comprehend why Josephine Baker became such a formidable spy, you must understand her journey before the war and why German forces so catastrophically underestimated her capabilities. Born Frida Josephine McDonald in St. Louis, Missouri in 1906, Baker emerged from poverty and systematic segregation. She departed home as a teenager to perform in vaudeville circuits, eventually reaching New York during the Harlem Renaissance flourishing. But 1920s America offered severely constrained opportunities for black performers. Segregation confined black entertainers to black audiences in segregated venues. In 1925, Baker departed for Paris. France transformed everything. The 1920s French were experiencing profound fascination with black American culture, jazz, dance, artistic expression. Baker became a sensation almost instantaneously. Her performances at the Folies Bergerie and subsequently the Casino de Paris achieved legendary status. By the late 1920s, she commanded the highest salary of any European entertainer. But Baker wasn't merely a performer. She possessed intelligence, political awareness, and profound gratitude toward France for providing opportunities America had systematically denied her. When France granted her citizenship in 1937, she embraced it with complete sincerity. She'd discovered a homeland that valued her as a human being not merely as colored help. When war erupted in 1939, Baker volunteered without hesitation. She offered her services to the WWII Bureau, French military intelligence. Initially, her offer faced dismissal. Spies required invisibility, unremarkability, the capacity to disappear into crowds. Josephine Baker represented the complete opposite, France's most recognizable woman. However, Jacques Apty, an intelligence officer within the WWII Bureau, perceived what others overlooked. Baker's celebrity wasn't a disadvantage. It was flawless cover. Consider it from an intelligence operations perspective. A spy requires access to targets, legitimate reasons for travel, ability to collect information without arousing suspicion. Baker possessed all three advantages. Her fame granted access to elite society gatherings where German officers and Vichy collaborators congregated. As an entertainer, charm and sociability were expected behaviors. People spoke candidly in her presence because entertainers supposedly avoided politics. Her profession provided justification for travel. Concert tours throughout Europe and North Africa appeared natural. Border guards and customs officials wouldn't question why Josephine Baker crossed international borders. She was performing. Most critically, Nazi racial ideology functioned in her favor. The Nazis believed black individuals were intellectually inferior, incapable of sophisticated reasoning or strategic analysis. They perceived Baker as entertainment, someone who sang and danced, but couldn't possibly comprehend politics or military strategy. This racist assumption rendered her invisible as a security threat. German officers would discuss classified information in her presence because they assumed she was too frivolous, too uneducated to understand or care about military intelligence. They were spectacularly, catastrophically mistaken. Baker spoke fluent French, German, and English. She was exceptionally intelligent and politically sophisticated. She comprehended exactly what the Nazis represented, and she was prepared to risk everything to oppose them. Apty recruited her formally in September 1939, immediately following war declaration. He became her handler, traveling alongside her under cover of being her personal assistant. Their partnership would endure throughout the entire war. Baker's initial assignment was straightforward: attend social gatherings, socialize with German officers and Vichy officials, listen to their conversations and report findings. The intelligence she collected, troop movements, supply complications, morale assessments, defensive positions, was transcribed in invisible ink onto her sheet music. She transported that sheet music across borders constantly. Who would suspect Josephine Baker's musical scores contained military intelligence? Customs officials observed an entertainer traveling with her music. They never saw a spy carrying classified secrets. The invisible ink was formulated by resistance chemists. When exposed to specific chemical agents, the notations on her sheet music margins revealed detailed intelligence reports. Baker would perform concerts throughout France and North Africa, and her sheet music, concealing invisible messages, would travel unchallenged. This method was brilliant precisely because of its apparent obviousness. Baker was renowned for her music. Naturally, she carried sheet music. The Germans never suspected those scores contained anything beyond musical notation. By early 1940, Baker was supplying regular intelligence to the WWII Bureau. She attended Parisian parties where German officers conversed freely. She performed at gatherings where Vichy collaborators discussed their arrangements with the occupiers. She overheard information no other French agent could access because no other agent could navigate those circles without suspicion. And she accomplished all of this while maintaining her performing career, continuing to entertain behaving as though nothing had changed. The Germans perceived exactly what they expected: a black American entertainer who was apolitical and grateful for performance opportunities. They never detected the spy systematically collecting intelligence on their occupation. By late 1940, France had been partitioned. Northern France, including Paris, fell under direct German occupation. Southern France remained nominally independent under the Vichy government, but Vichy collaborated extensively with the Nazis. Baker had to evacuate Paris. As occupation solidified, remaining in the capital became excessively dangerous. But leaving Paris didn't terminate intelligence work. It expanded it. She relocated to her chair too, in the Dordogne region of southern France, Les Mélandes. The chair too became a resistance safe house. Baker sheltered people fleeing the Nazis, assisted Jews in escaping, and provided cover for resistance operatives. But her most crucial work remained intelligence gathering, and for that she needed to travel. Between 1940 and 1941, Baker undertook extensive concert tours across France, Spain, Portugal, and North Africa. Officially, she was performing. Actually, she was gathering intelligence and smuggling information. The concert tour provided cover for multiple intelligence operations. In each city, Baker performed for mixed audiences: German officers, Vichy officials, local elites, ordinary citizens. Following performances, she'd attend parties and receptions where powerful individuals gathered. German officers and Vichy collaborators desired meetings with the famous Josephine Baker. They invited her to social functions, dined with her, escorted her through military facilities, and conversed freely in her presence. They revealed troop dispositions. They complained about supply shortages. They discussed defensive fortifications. They gossiped about command conflicts. They disclosed information that trained intelligence officers would have eliminated to obtain. And Baker transcribed everything in invisible ink on her sheet music. Jacques Apty, traveling as her assistant, helped encode the intelligence. They utilized invisible ink formulas supplied by French intelligence. The ink remained colorless when applied, but would reveal text when treated with specific chemicals known to Allied intelligence services. Baker's methodology was systematic. During or immediately following gatherings, she'd excuse herself and write notes in regular ink about the event. Names, dates, general topics discussed. This served as cover if Germans searched her possessions, just an entertainer maintaining a diary. Then later, in privacy, she'd transcribe the actual intelligence in invisible ink on the margins of her sheet music. Troop numbers, locations, fortification details, supply routes, everything the Germans had carelessly mentioned in her presence. The sheet music would then accompany her to her next performance. When she reached locations where Free French intelligence maintained contacts, the music would be, accidentally, left behind or gifted to local musicians who were actually resistance contacts. The music would reach Free French intelligence in London or North Africa, where chemists would reveal the concealed messages. Baker's intelligence helped Allied forces understand German defenses, plan operations, and track Nazi movements. One particularly valuable intelligence piece came from a gathering in Portugal in 1941. A German officer attempting to impress Baker mentioned that Wehrmacht forces struggled with fuel shortages along the Atlantic coast because fuel was being redirected to prepare for operations in Eastern Europe. Baker reported this. The intelligence helped confirm Allied suspicions that Germany was planning Soviet invasion. When Operation Barbarossa launched in June 1941, Allied intelligence wasn't surprised. The concert tour also enabled Baker to facilitate escapes: Jews fleeing persecution, resistance members evading arrest, Allied pilots shot down over France. Baker helped smuggle many to safety. She'd provide people with documentation, allow them to pose as entourage members, and smuggle them across borders. Border guards inspecting Josephine Baker's traveling party observed what they expected: an entertainer with assistants, musicians, and staff. They didn't scrutinize who those people actually were. One documented case involved a Jewish family fleeing Paris. Baker provided them with papers identifying them as her technical crew. They traveled with her from France to Portugal, crossing multiple borders. Guards observed Josephine Baker's tour group and permitted passage. The family reached Portugal and eventually escaped to the United States. Baker also smuggled photographs. French resistance members provided her with photos of German military installations, fortifications, and equipment. She'd pin the photos inside her clothing. Who would search Josephine Baker? The photographs reached Allied intelligence, providing visual confirmation of German defensive positions. Some of these photos were utilized to plan Allied operations, including preparation for the eventual France invasion in 1944. Throughout 1941, Baker continued this work: gather intelligence, transcribe it in invisible ink, smuggle it across borders, help people escape. The routine was exhausting and perilous. Discovery would mean arrest, interrogation, and probable execution. But Baker never faltered. France had granted her opportunities America denied. France had treated her as a person when America treated her as second class. She would risk everything to defend her adopted homeland. In late 1941, Baker extended her concert tour to North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, French colonies where Vichy control was strong, but where Free French intelligence also operated. North Africa was strategically crucial. The Allies needed intelligence on German and Italian forces in the region. Baker's fame granted her access to all of it. She performed in Casablanca, Algiers, Tunis. German officers stationed in North Africa, Italian officers from nearby Libya, Vichy military commanders, all attended her performances. All desired to meet her afterward, and all conversed freely around her. One particularly valuable intelligence operation occurred in Morocco. Baker was invited to tour military installations by Vichy officers wanting to impress her. They showed her airfields, assuming she'd be amazed by military might. She memorized aircraft numbers, types, deployment patterns. She observed fuel storage, ammunition depots, defensive positions. Everything she witnessed was transcribed in invisible ink on her sheet music and smuggled to Free French contacts in North Africa. This intelligence helped Allied planners prepare for Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, in November 1942. But North Africa also brought personal cost. In 1941, Baker became seriously ill, possibly a gynecological infection that developed into septicemia. She was hospitalized in Casablanca for months, so gravely ill that rumors spread across Europe that she'd died. Baker came close to death multiple times. She underwent multiple surgeries. She was bedridden for over a year. But even while recovering, she continued intelligence work. Her hospital room became a meeting place for Free French operatives. Under the cover of visiting the famous entertainer, resistance members would come to her room to exchange information and coordinate operations. By late 1942, Baker had recovered sufficiently to resume limited activities. North Africa had fallen to the Allies after Operation Torch. The war's tide was shifting. Baker joined the Free French forces officially. She was commissioned as a sub-lieutenant in the Women's Auxiliary of the French Air Force. She performed for Allied troops across North Africa and the Middle East. Concerts that boosted troop morale while maintaining her cover. The Free French awarded her the Croix de Guerre for her intelligence work. After the war, She would receive the Médaille de la Résistance avec Rosette and be made a Chevalier of the Légion d'honneur. But during the war, her decorations remained classified. Revealing them would have exposed her espionage activities. After the war ended in 1945, Josephine Baker returned to France as a hero, but her espionage work remained largely classified for years. French intelligence didn't immediately reveal the full extent of her activities. Those details emerged gradually over decades. Jacques Abti wrote a book after the war, Le Gars Secret de Josephine Baker, that revealed many details of their intelligence operations. The book confirmed what some had suspected: Baker hadn't just been a patriotic entertainer. She'd been an active intelligence operative conducting espionage operations under deep cover. The French government recognized her service with significant honors: the Croix de Guerre with Palme, the Médaille de la Résistance avec Rosette, and Chevalier of the Légion d'honneur, later elevated to commander. But recognition was complicated by the secrecy surrounding intelligence work and by prejudice. Some French officials were more comfortable recognizing Baker as an entertainer who'd supported the troops than as a spy who'd gathered crucial intelligence. After the war, Baker continued performing, but also became a civil rights activist. Her wartime experience fighting fascism informed her post-war fight against racism. She refused to perform for segregated audiences in the United States. She participated in the March on Washington in 1963. She adopted 12 children from different ethnic and religious backgrounds, calling them her Rainbow Tribe, and raising them at Les Melandes as a demonstration that people of all races could live together harmoniously. Baker died in 1975 in Paris. Her funeral was attended by thousands. She received full French military honors, one of the few women to receive such recognition. In 2021, Baker was inducted into the French Panthéon, the highest honor France can bestow. She became the first black woman to receive this recognition. The ceremony acknowledged all aspects of her life: performer, resistance fighter, civil rights activist. The induction specifically mentioned her espionage work. The French government officially recognized that Josephine Baker had been a spy, that her intelligence work had contributed to Allied victory, and that her service deserved the highest national honor. Josephine Baker's espionage career demonstrates several crucial intelligence principles. Effective cover is everything. Her fame wasn't a liability, it was her greatest asset. She could access places and people that traditional spies couldn't reach. Nazi racism blinded them to Baker's capabilities. They observed a black entertainer and assumed she was politically naive and intellectually limited. Their prejudice prevented them from recognizing a sophisticated intelligence operative. Baker didn't use dead drops, coded radio transmissions, or covert photography in traditional senses. She used invisible ink on sheet music, smuggled people by including them in her entourage, and hid photographs in her clothing. Her methods matched her cover and capabilities perfectly. The Nazis never suspected Josephine Baker was a spy because they couldn't imagine that a black female entertainer could be intelligent, politically aware, and strategically valuable. Every racist assumption they made created blind spots she exploited ruthlessly. Those blind spots cost them dearly. Intelligence Baker gathered helped the Allies understand German dispositions, plan operations, and ultimately defeat Nazi forces. She walked into rooms filled with German officers, charmed them, listened to them, and reported everything they said. She carried military intelligence across borders in her sheet music, while customs officials smiled and waved her through. She smuggled people to safety by hiding them in plain sight as members of her famous entourage. She did all of this because the Nazis assumed she couldn't. And their assumption became her advantage. Josephine Baker was a performer who entertained millions. She was a civil rights activist who fought segregation. And she was a spy who helped defeat Nazi Germany by being exactly what her enemies assumed she couldn't be: intelligent, strategic, and dangerous. The Nazis thought they were meeting a famous entertainer. They were meeting French intelligence's most effective agent. She remembered everything. She transcribed it in invisible ink. She smuggled it across borders. And she helped win a war. The black female spy who infiltrated Nazi networks in France wasn't hiding in shadows. She was on stage in the spotlight, exactly where everyone could see her. And because everyone could see her, no one saw her for what she really was. That's genius, level spycraft. That's Josephine Baker's secret war.